Parliament votes for a spring budget. First ministers meet. COVID mandates were full communism. Bill C-18 still in force. And it's all about energy. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. With me, Iain Burns, managing editor in our nation's capital. Look at the Okanagan skies behind me there. Absolutely amazing. Beautiful day here in the Okanagan. Nation's capital?
Not so good. I mean, it should be good, but the fires in Manitoba and the rest of the prairies have spread their filthy smoke over the skies of Ottawa.
Yeah, I saw a piece on there, like most of those fires were human-caused as well, eh? There you go.
Who'd have thought, eh? That never happens.
No. Well, it looks like we're going to have a budget after all. The vote. 166 yay and 164 nay. A couple of the Liberals forgot to show up.
Yeah, it doesn't bode well, does it? But I think, you know, it doesn't bode well in the way that like everybody else ganged up on the Liberals. They couldn't find any help. But this is an extremely unpopular, it's an extremely unpopular idea, let's say, that they're trying to push, which is that they don't need to do a budget. So I don't think they were ever going to get anybody to support them on that. Not the NDP, not the Bloc. Nobody was going to, realistically. So I don't think it's actually that much of a surprise. But I've been reading a little bit about this, and there's some confusion about whether this will actually have an effect because of one of the many tricks of Parliament. There's something about this vote that maybe it won't actually be binding. And anyway, it even says not just a budget, but Andrew Scheer's motion or amendment actually says something about a statement, economic statement, which is an extremely vague term, unlike budget, which is pretty, that actually means something. People know what that is. So it might end up just being like an A4 piece of paper that says, we're going to do this. And then that would count as an economic statement. And that would be a little bit sort of, that would be a little bit of a damp squib, I think.
Yeah, we got a clip here from Michael Barrett, an MP there, Conservative MP. We're going to play this clip.
So the first breaking news for you from me for this parliamentary session is that a Conservative motion requiring an accounting of Canada's finances, with Mark Carney having to produce a budget this spring. Now, Prime Minister Carney said he wasn't going to produce a budget at all this year, then said he would do it this fall. And then he tabled a bill with $500 billion in spending. Now, this is extraordinary. He said he was going to cap increases to government spending at 2%. This is an 8% increase. It also sees massive increases to consultants outside of government. I want you to think Arrive scam when we talk about consultants. So we need accountability. We need to see what's happening with this $500 billion. Is this more inflationary spending? And is that why the Carney Liberals don't want it scrutinized by parliamentary committees?
There you go.
I think like the main headline here is that they lost a vote. This government has literally just started. There was all this talk about what a glorious victory it was in the election and all the rest of it, and then they failed at the first hurdle. They can't even like. I mean, this was such a ridiculous thing to lose on as well. Like the throne speech, and it was sort of expressing thanks to King Charles, fairly sort of innocuous, and then they've just right off the bat they've lost a vote. So that sort of, I don't think the average Canadian is going to like be particularly wise to what this signifies or care very much. But I think in Ottawa, this is almost like first blood, and it's like saying you're nowhere near as strong as you think you are. Like you are very much a minority government, and we can beat you. We can, defeat you in votes. So I think that'll be emboldening for the opposition, and the Liberals will not be feeling great about that, I don't think.
The First Minister's meeting, Doug Ford said it was the best meeting in 10 years. Doesn't say much about the prior 10 years, but same group of people, other than one guy's now in the front as opposed to being in the shadows. But he said it was Doug Ford's definitely in the tire pumping phase of his career.
Yeah, he came in because Mark Carney in that press conference was an embarrassment, I think, and he showed contempt, as he has done many times, for the Canadian people and for the press, who on paper are supposed to represent the Canadian people, because it was quite a long press conference and a quite hyped meeting, and he said nothing at all, which is what he does every single day. Refuses to say anything. It's all just kind of like the first few minutes of a boring sort of HR meeting, but it's just that forever, and he's the Prime Minister. So he was asked a question, very specific question, and did that again, refused to answer it, and just waffled and got defensive. And he was like, "No, as I'm sure you know," and all the rest of it. He started to have a go, and then that's when Captain Canada jumped in, because Carney looked like he was making a bit of a mess of it, and then Ford jumped in and said that folks, it's the best meeting we've had in 10 years, even though he's only been Premier for 7 years, but I guess he was there in spirit for the other 3 years. And he just went on, and I'm not, and he started to talk about Trump as well, and how, we're at war, and how, Canada's in peril. Apparently we're not in peril, are we? Because the Prime Minister still hasn't said anything about anything, still hasn't put any plans forward. So obviously we're not really in peril. I think we're quite safe based on how Mark Carney's reacting to it. If a house was on fire and the fireman was sat there smoking a pipe and relaxing, I think we'd all be pretty chilled out about the fire, wouldn't we? And that's how Carney's acting. But yeah, as for Dougie, I don't know what his game is. I feel like maybe his attitude is just, if I suck up to somebody enough and make them like me enough, then maybe they'll give me things. That seems to be his attitude, but I don't know. Dougie's playing more complicated games than I can understand, I think.
He's definitely, I remember we billeted some Kelowna Rockets, and the saying from them was always like, the guys there pumping my tires, and I think Doug Ford is doing a good job of pumping Mark Carney's tires. We're going to play a little clip here from Mark Carney, though.
Prime Minister, other than the premiers of BC and Quebec, there seems to be growing consensus in support of pipelines carrying bitumen east, west, probably north as well. Is the federal government at this point considering pipelines a project of national significance, and will you be sidestepping certain environmental requirements outlined in Bill C-69 to fast-track such a project?
Well, the first thing to say is, and let me be a bit more specific, if I could, because and I will defer to the premiers to add, but the Western premiers and the premiers of the territories met and supported an approach. The Western corridor, the Western and Arctic corridor, effectively a corridor between port to port to port, from Pacific Northwest to James Bay to Grays Bay Point, and within that are opportunities in energy, critical minerals, and well beyond. And specifically within energy, opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater. Now, within the broader context of national interest, the interest is in, as mentioned in the press release, decarbonized barrels. So working alongside forms of decarbonization for those barrels. That is absolutely in our interest. It provides diversification of trade partners. It provides the development of new industries. It provides economic activity across the West and into the North. So yes, there's real potential there. We took up a good deal of our time in discussions and potential to move forward on that. And if further developed, the federal government will look to advance it.
Clear as mud. Clear as mud, right?
What's so funny is there's been some articles have come out, I don't know if you've seen them or read them, suggesting that Mark Carney is like harsh in cabinet meetings and meetings in general, and that if you come and you're not prepared and you don't know the detail, he's apparently ruthless and brutal, and he sort of like chastises people. I mean, can you imagine? I can easily imagine if he came to me as an editor, if he came to me as a reporter and said, all right, here's my idea for a story, and he said that, I just be like, well, why are you here? Why have you walked into this room to talk to me? You don't have anything to say. Go away. Go and find, figure it out, then come back, and then we'll talk about it once you've got an idea. I mean, this is, I've got a feeling that this is going to be his undoing, because he refuses to say anything ever. And it's and then when journalists pick up on that, as they already have, and she had, if you heard it in their tone, when they pick up on it and they press him on it, he gets defensive and churlish, and he's like, "Well, if I may, I'll shift it forward and add some specifics." It's just like, that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable from somebody who's in charge of a country, is it? I think this is going to filter through. I feel like, in the way that Justin Trudeau's kind of, what would you call it, virtue signaling or whatever, like his waffly behavior, the way that eventually filtered through and Canadians started to like actively despise him because of that. I feel like eventually this is going to come through to the average person, and that because the issues are only going to become more and more serious, and the whole point of being a leader is that you're decisive, and the one thing that Mark Carney is not is decisive. He can't make a decision, can't say anything. He can't even make a clear statement, never mind a decision. So I think, I know Chrystia Freeland is watching this. Maybe she can get the word to Carney. If you want your boy to survive a bit longer, tell him to stop doing that, because it's going to sink him in the end, I think.
I used to work for a public company and go into meetings, and there's this one guy that would go into it, and they would ask him a question, and he would say, they asked him if he's sure about that, and he would say, "I'm absolutely sure. Most likely, I think." I said, you need to stop saying that. You need to stop qualifying. You're absolutely sure. You can't say those words in the same sense, and that's what that is, right? It's just like, absolutely for sure.
He did that about the projects, didn't he? He's like, let me list some projects, probably. He listed a few that probably might maybe get selected.
And then we have a lady that doesn't. You don't get any ambiguity from her. Let's play a clip here from Danielle Smith.
Why tie the issue of getting a commitment for an oil pipeline to national unity?
Well, you have to understand just how damaged Alberta is by the fact that we didn't get pipelines built. If we had built Northern Gateway, if we'd built Keystone and we'd built Energy East, we'd have 2.5 million barrels more per day of production, which is $55 billion a year worth of GDP value, which is worth $17 billion to my government alone, and about an equal amount to the federal government. So this is not just an ideological argument. It's not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada. Any of the projects that you will see on the ultimate list, I will tell you that a bitumen pipeline will be by far the greatest benefit to all of Canada. That's why we're going to continue to push for it, because it's a good project. It's good for our country. There's $9 trillion worth of value in discoverable and achievable reserves right now. And so why would you leave that in the ground? No other country in the world would, and we shouldn't either.
That's all the time we have for questions,
okay.
guys. You have to
Thanks,
get on to the meeting.
Well, I mean, to refer back to the previous video of Carney, where he's talking about decarbonized oil, which doesn't make any sense, as usual. It's a sort of a horrible attack on the English language. But what's meant by that really is these ridiculously expensive and futile carbon capture processes where you suck out air that's been polluted or something like that and bury it in the ground forever. And then you can export your oil, because apparently that's okay now. It's fine because you've sucked it in. Now, the idea that that's going to be like a great moneymaker, and that's gonna work out well for Canadian industry, I think is deluded. But apparently Smith's down for that. She said that she's okay about that, and the oil industry being net zero by 2050 and all sorts of things. But I'm not sure how strong a relationship that has with reality, frankly.
There's companies that sell carbon credits, and then there's companies that buy carbon credits, and I think that's kind of the main game. Like even for instance, Tesla sells billions of dollars worth of carbon credits to other auto manufacturers because of the emissions control put on the other ones. So they just buy carbon credits from Tesla. And I think that's Brookfield's also going to be a carbon credit seller, but they've been called out on some of their calculations as well. We got another clip here from Danielle Smith talking about what you just talked about there too in the carbon emissions.
decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, ultimately using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the Northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
Yeah, she's basically saying, sure, let's do that, but also let's build a pipeline, right? Like she definitely
my understanding of that, where she's talking about small modular reactors, nuclear power, mini nuclear power plants, and hydroelectric and all that. My understanding of that scheme, carbon capture scheme, is that you have like a nuclear power plant or whatever, or a dam devoted exclusively to powering these carbon capture devices, which like suck the air in and bury the air. I mean, I just find that kind of crazy when obviously it doesn't matter what Canada does, as we've said many times, that Canada's of no consequence when it comes to global temperature or climate change or anything like that. Canada's way too small to have an effect. But China, Russia, Indonesia, Nigeria, India, the US, all those countries that do actually have an effect, are they going to be doing this in the future? I'm not so sure they will be. So it almost seems like we're gonna build nuclear power plants that have no other purpose but to power carbon capture that nobody else is really doing, and it has no effect on the world temperature. It's just completely futile, and it's just to make Mark Carney and people that people like voters in Quebec and British Columbia and Toronto feel okay about it. Is that what it is? Because if so, can you imagine if there's a situation where they've run out of power in Alberta and they desperately need power, and then they've got these nuclear reactors here that serve no other purpose but to facilitate carbon capture? Do you think the Premier of Alberta at that time is going to say, oh, well, we can't sacrifice carbon capture, guys. It's just going to have to be that hospital that doesn't receive power? All of this just seems ridiculous to me. It just seems like this isn't like rational thinking to me. It doesn't seem to be very sensible. And I guess Danielle Smith, probably deep down, she would agree with that, but she's playing along, isn't she? Because she just needs, you say, she just wants that pipeline. She wants the pat on the back, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's saying, sure, whatever you need, but build the pipeline first. Build the pipeline. But, they're probably saying, we'll build the pipeline after we have a carbon capture scheme. So like what? When? Like when? And then BC pushing back against access to the BC's northern coast as well. So this is out of City News, Vancouver. Imagine that.
Well, David Eby wasn't even there. Yeah. He's on a trip across the Pacific Ocean there in Asia. It was Nikki Sharma who was there instead. She didn't say a word. She didn't even look interested in that press conference, frankly. I mean, even like the fella in charge of Nunavut, even he said something. And so did, I think it was Yukon as well, or maybe Northwest Territories. But even they came out and had something to say. These are territories with populations like, what, a third of the size of Kelowna or something like that. They still had made their voices heard. But the person representing British Columbia, one of the most important provinces in Canada, had just nothing to say other than on the sidelines, like trying to pour cold water on the whole thing, the whole enterprise. But I mean, yeah, I don't know what Carney's going to do about this. If Carney does say yes to the Prince Rupert, the Northwest one, I don't know what will happen to British Columbia. I guess they're going to require some kind of bribe, aren't they? That's my assumption, that they're going to need something in exchange for that from the federal government. But it remains to be seen what that is.
How about fixing the big hole in the budget?
Maybe if the fairy godmother of Mark Carney can fix that. I don't know. Can he?
I don't know. Scott Moe got some attention, though. Carney says it's a top priority to persuade China to drop its tariffs on Canadian agricultural products. And said that's what he said. Some premiers urged Ottawa to abandon its policy of tariffing Chinese electric vehicles. Well, I mean, if they release the Chinese EVs into Canada, that'll be the end of the automobile sector, likely in Canada as well.
Well, it's like spinning plates, isn't it? There's so many different. It's like you fix one thing. It's like, okay, Saskatchewan, we'll fix this for you. And then the auto industry in Ontario dies. And it's like, okay, we'll fix this for you guys. And then it's like something else dies. And because of the way that Canada, with it being a confederation, the way that it's built, it's kind of like, it almost makes it easier just to not fix anything, really, and just be like, oh, well. And that's kind of where we're at. It's because there isn't that national unity. And I know Doug Ford, he tries to pretend that he cares about the whole of Canada, but I'm pretty sure that he would happily sell out canola growers in Saskatchewan if it rescued the auto industry in Windsor, you know?
Well, I mean, this is the first time that I've heard Carney talk about the tariffs. I mean, Scott Moe's made some noise about the tariffs on canola, but that's the first time I heard anything from Mark Carney on it.
But it's also like, is it realistic to think that's going to happen? I mean, not only would that destroy, you know, the EV manufacturing market, or whatever you want to call it, in Canada, but it's also kind of rewarding very, very bad behavior on the part of the Chinese who subsidize BYD and all the rest of it. And, you know, they're not legitimate businesses, really. They're extensions of the state in so many ways. And that's a big no-no in the World Trade Organization, of which China's, for some reason, a part, although it obviously shouldn't be. But, you know, how could Carney give that the green light? That wouldn't make sense. No, that's besides the damage that it would do to the market in Canada.
Yeah, BYD facing some concerns in South America as well, with even things like called on for human trafficking in that, and violations of basically labor laws there.
Well, they do it in China as well. I mean, obviously it's a bit different when they do it in another country, but.
Petitions for security checks. So all candidates for High Office Canada would undergo mandatory background security checks under a Commons petition sponsored by Liberal MP Robert Morrissey. The proposal follows the ejection of 4 ex-Liberal MPs in the past 5 months.
I can't believe that is not already the case.
You have to wonder, and then you'll have to wonder if it doesn't get put forth or passed, why it doesn't get passed, right? Because ex-MP Ruby Dalla was disqualified from Liberal leadership contest for non-disclosure of material facts and inaccurate financial reporting. So Ruby got the end of that stick. There you go.
And then Chandra Arya was dumped from the PN, and Mark Carney, you know, he didn't even have a chance to close the door. Mark Carney was in. And apparently the intelligentsia, if you can call it that, of this country has just completely forgotten about that. Doesn't care, doesn't want to talk about it, even though it's highly unusual, very suspicious and weird that happened. We're not going to talk about that.
And in continuing on that story, and this is again another Holly Dome Blacklock story, Cabinet won't explain why a bill passed by Parliament a year ago to unmask foreign agents is not in force. And they promised foreign registry would be in place this month, and yet it is not. And they said the Cabinet yesterday would not explain its failure to enforce the bill passed by Parliament a year ago to unmask foreign agents.
I mean, it could be something nefarious, couldn't it? Or it could also just be they haven't been working for half a year, and they've had other priorities, like trying to be elected again. So, I mean, it could literally just be the case that they're distracted or incompetent, but it could also be, obviously, something unpleasant as well.
And opposition leader Pierre Poilievre said the foreign registry should have been operating prior to April 28th balloting, and why haven't the Liberals got the foreign agent registry up and running? He's asked that a few times, and Poilievre asked reporters on April 9th. There you go. Another MP, a Bloc Québécois MP, questioning irregularities in the election process. And that's, he says that the Elections Canada must face parliamentary scrutiny for balloting irregularities, including random poll closures. And he's demanding transparency from Election Canada.
CBC going to hunt you down, mate. They're going to compare you to Trump, stop the steal and all that.
They've done that with Pierre Poilievre. We're going to get to that in a bit here. So yeah, so do we know if there's going to be a by-election yet in that the bloc?
Nothing has been announced yet, but
that's surprising.
I don't know. It's just a case. It's a legal case now, isn't it? So I guess it's just going to have to go through the courts, which is, that is just extraordinarily immoral on the by the Liberal Party. That, isn't it? I think to do that. There's no other word for it really. It's just dishonorable. Maybe would be another word.
Yeah, they should want it if they cared about democracy. They should say, okay, this one looks like a mess. Let's just redo this one.
But again, like to go back to I say intelligentsia. That's obviously, I don't think that such a thing exists. I don't think Canada has an intelligentsia. But the media, let's say, and influential voices in Canada, where are they? Where are they talking about this absolute disgrace and this travesty, where an election was won by a single vote, and yet Elections Canada has come out and admitted that they screwed up, and at least one vote, which would have nullified the result, was not counted, and it was Elections Canada's fault. I mean, this makes a mockery of Canadian democracy. As long as this continues, Canada's democracy is in question. It's besmirched by this. It's a massive deal, but nobody's talking about it, and Mark Carney's not being asked about it. We just roll on, don't we?
And then I think this is our last Black Bloc story, though. And the newly elected MP, Dr. Strauss, says COVID mandates were full communism. We're going to play a little clip here from Dr. Strauss here in his maiden speech.
Debate. Please, the debate, the member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the people of my hometown in Kitchener South Hespeler who give me this opportunity to make a maiden speech today in Canada's House of Commons. May I never forget that this is their seat, and may I faithfully serve them so long as they see fit to keep me in it. Mr. Speaker, there is no chance I could stand before you today without the love and support of my wife, Simone. She is a brilliant physician and scientist who has now given me the greatest possible gifts, our children Penelope and Felix. 6 months before this election, she nearly died delivering Felix to us. She spent a couple days in the ICU on life support, and today is at home in Hespeler, being just the best mom in the world to our 2 kids. I should be at home. I should be at home with them. They are the best part of my life.
We didn't cue that up right in the right spot there. Apologize for that. But he did go on to say that the zenith of all this top-down control came during the pandemic, and they locked Canadians down in their homes, ruined weddings, funerals, Easters, proms, and Christmas, closed doors, kept mothers and children from brothers and sisters, deprived the House of its ancient rights, spent $600 billion of taxpayer money with no budget, and doubled our national debt to pay healthy 16-year-olds who sit in their basement, said Strauss. They did all this in the name of crisis management. Physicians, professors, journalists who spoke out against these abuses were hunted down. They had their licenses and their jobs threatened. I know this because it happened to me. And they're starting to speak out more. They gave luxurious contracts to their friends in academia to promote their misinformation and gave hundreds of millions of dollars to mainstream media to promote government narratives. These 3 institutions, government, media, and academia, have important roles to regulate each other. And you and I have talked about this a million times. We've done stories during COVID that we received a lot of hate, and when we did the truckers rally stories for Okanagan people that were attending it. If you spoke out, we interviewed several doctors and other healthcare professionals that dared to speak out and were punished for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of another thing that nobody's really talking about, isn't it? Like the excesses of that period it seems like the wounds are still too fresh for a lot of people, and it's going to take some time, isn't it? It's going to take another few years.
I think they're still scared. Like, I mean, you and I have done a bunch of stories on Bonnie Henry's mandates here, because British Columbia held on to their mandates when almost everywhere in the world they were released, and they still had mandates here in British Columbia for healthcare professionals to work in healthcare when there was such a shortage of healthcare workers, and it was puzzling. We did so many stories on it, and we could not get an answer from Bonnie Henry or Adrian Dix at the time, who was the Minister of Health.
Yeah, and he was hardly punished for that, was he? And nor was Bonnie Henry, nor was anyone, really, particularly in the BC administration. The voters nearly punished them, but they just about survived, didn't they? But it's true. I mean, there's been no reckoning, and that will have to come. Obviously, that's going to have to be later. I feel like maybe if Poilievre had won, let's say in an alternate reality where John Rustad had won and Poilievre had won, I feel like it would be a lot more out there, and it would be front and center a bit more. But as it is, I guess the people that implemented these policies are still in power, so
no,
it's not really being discussed.
The one that you would think like organizations like the CPAs would have stood up against is, like the freezing of bank accounts. Freezing of random bank accounts. You made a $250 donation towards a movement, and then they froze your bank account. That bakery, and I think it was on the island there, had their bank account. I mean, it's basically, if they freeze your bank account, you can't do business. You can't deposit or take money out. You can't make your payroll. It is devastating. And they did that because she made a donation of $250.
Yeah, and then criminals hacked the website, didn't they? That was being used like a donation website. They hacked it and got all the information, and then spread it around and started saying that giving it to journalists, and started saying that it was in the public interest. Obviously, it wasn't in the public interest. That was absurd, and they haven't faced criminal charges for that obvious crime.
They raised like millions of dollars through that GoFundMe, and Rosemary Barton, one of the anchors on CBC, was already spewing out that that money was coming from Russian money. Turns out it wasn't. But she never corrected that. I never heard her correct that. But I don't know where she got that from. She just got that from somewhere. And then reporters were actually doxing truckers too. They were actually taking the VIN numbers and then tracing it back, and then doxing that company, and then doing stories on it and outing them and trying to hurt their business. Like, absolutely surreal. The reporters
again, the word immoral comes to mind. That was extraordinary behavior. That very disreputable.
The media's job is to hold power accountable, not to be the hammer for power.
Well, I think there is no orthodoxy that can exist in Canada that the CBC won't go to bat for and protect and defend, like a sort of a she-lion protecting her cubs. And that was the orthodoxy then. The orthodoxy was these people that resist the mandates or whatever, object to the mandates, they're despicable people, they're conspiracy theorists, racists, all the rest of it, and they're trying to kill your granny. That's their strategy, and they're somehow in league with Donald Trump or something like that. I mean, or Putin even. That was the orthodoxy, and the CBC just slurped that up, didn't they? Very eagerly, and the rest of the media, I'm sorry to say, pretty much went along with it.
Yeah. Sad but true that media's job is to hold power accountable, and our state-funded media does a really poor job of that. Actually, they actually amplify. Tim Hodgson, the energy minister, said, on a tweet here, said, exciting news today, legislation enabling the development of offshore renewable energy in Newfoundland and Labrador comes into force for the first time in Canadian history. There you go.
Well, they've got some other energy there, haven't they? In the sea off the coast of Newfoundland.
I mean, the stuff that Norway uses to build
not talk about that.
The one that Norway uses to build this huge sovereign wealth fund?
Yeah, but that's bad for the environment or whatever. But these things here, they're great, aren't they? Very efficient, and we love them. We love a good turbine.
Somebody makes good money off selling them, that's for sure.
Yeah, and then disposing of them, especially when they're out to sea. Very, very, very costly enterprise to go and retrieve them, and then to, get rid of them. But yeah, as you say, somebody's making huge money off that.
The G7 protest to be live streamed to leaders in Kananaskis to give protesters a voice. There you go. Law enforcement officials overseeing security at G7 Leaders Summit in Alberta are expecting large protests, but plan to make sure they're peaceful. And that includes some live streaming on some sites to Kananaskis, where leaders from Canada, United States, France, Germany, Japan, and UK, and Italy, and European Union will meet. And India not invited, and India not attending.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, really. But and this is funny because they're trying to explain this by saying it's like so we can protect people's charter rights. But when we've just been talking about COVID and the reaction to COVID, where was the effort? Like, this is an extraordinary effort. Like, really weird and unusual to go to this effort to protect the freedom to protest. Like, where was that? Where was that dedication to protecting charter rights a few years ago?
That was an embarrassment to Canadian democracy, an absolute embarrassment what they did there. And like you said, the people are still in power that caused that embarrassment. And yet, like the hypocrisy right here is just astounding.
Yeah, because this is standard. Let's be honest, they're up there quite literally in their like mountain fortress, hidden away from the plebs, and they're very safe and comfortable, and there's no way that they're threatened. In that scenario, it's like, all right, well, let these hippies and idiots and whatever they are, pro-Palestine people, make fools of themselves, and we'll put it on a little screen over there, which we can easily ignore, and then we feel great about that. But when there was actually a bit of a threat, and it seemed like the people were, the people were a little bit dangerous, like during the truckers' rally, there was obviously fear, wasn't there, on the part of the government. Then there's no time for that kind of thing. It's just like emergencies act, like bring out the sledgehammer. I think it corresponds directly to how seriously they take the threat to their position, to their power. And obviously, with this like rabble of nobodies that are going to protest against the G7, like that's no threat to anybody, is it? That's just nothing. It's just
so the threat in Ottawa there was they weren't even attending at the time during COVID. They weren't even in Parliament. And so the threat of honking horns and lots of noise violations, most of the charges are nuisance and mischief charges. There was no other charges really in Ottawa other than a lot of mischief.
It had the flavor of almost like a kind of nascent rebellion. It had the flavor of like a popular uprising, even if it was in the very, very early stages. Oh, for sure,
because it was across Canada, and there were people funding it, and they were, they'd had enough. And, those bouncy castles were driving them absolutely crazy.
And they got blamed for so much that they didn't do, like starting fires in apartments. And none of that was their fault, but it was all used, wasn't it? It was all collected by power and the establishment and used to condemn them. Just like that extremely convenient swastika that made an appearance for about 10 seconds and then with a man in a mask who then disappeared and was never found again.
And then it happened to be Trudeau's photographer that happened to be in the right place at the right time. Imagine that, right?
Sneaky. Maybe we'll do an FOI request in 50 years' time and find out what really happened there.
We're talking about India. Harper says Canada should heal its relationship with India and cut ties with Sikh nationalists. So he calls on Ottawa to resurrect its relationship with India after years of feuding between the nations caused by accusations that India has been linked to murders of political activists in Canada. Harper also said Canada's political party should cut all ties with activists pushing for a Sikh state to declare independence from India.
Yeah, Harper's like, I didn't quite know this until relatively recently, but Harper's quite popular in India and among Indians. But he's obviously taken it upon himself. He thinks that it's an important responsibility that he has to try and heal those wounds. But obviously, it is a big deal, and I'm surprised that Mark Carney hasn't got a plan or said anything about it, because India is, most people now seem to think, we can never really know for sure, but most experts seem to think that India now is the biggest country in the world, that has the largest population in the world, larger than China's. So, I mean, it's a big deal, India. You can't just ignore a country like that, You can't just forget about it and like stick to your guns about whatever it is that whatever it is that's upset them. You've got to try and figure something out there. But yeah, the Liberals, they're all about trying to make things work with the Chinese, but not so much the Indians. It's an accusation that's been thrown at them a number of times.
Justin Trudeau visited India a while back there, and then his plane got delayed there because they found some substances on the plane there that they were trying to deal with.
Well, he also made an absolute fool out of himself dancing around in Indian regalia, didn't he? Didn't go down well.
Well, I mean, to be fair to him, he's done worse.
Yeah, like dressing up as an Indian with paint in his face and wearing a turban and all that. I think that might be worse.
See, I'm trying to be nice. To be fair, he's done a lot worse, right? So.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not cool. And I mean, just to be a bit more precise about it, there are quite a lot of Khalistani activists. Khalistan that's the name of the state that they want to create in India. Not even a big issue in India, by the way, and among Indians themselves. They think it's a weird, obscure issue, that it's not going to happen. But anyway, in Canada, among the sort of diaspora, you have these people that want an independent state, and they're politically influential, and they have their, they're influential in the Liberal Party and in the NDP as well, and even the Conservatives. And that's it, really. That's the issue. It's just that the politicians are reluctant to alienate those people who provide support, and can sort of guarantee a certain amount of votes and funding and all the rest of it. So they're reluctant to do anything about it. But again, talking about morals and whatnot, it would be the principled thing to do something about that, wouldn't it?
The OECD says Donald Trump's tariff regime will slow growth around the world this year. And the group said global growth will be modest at 2.9%, down from an earlier forecast of 3.1%.
0.2 percentage points.
There you go.
I mean, it's going to affect the likes of Canada almost. Canada's going to be like the worst affected in some ways, because obviously of how connected we are.
Our steel and aluminum industry and our auto sector are two big ones, 100%. 100%.
Steel, yeah. Steel and aluminium. I mean, we've set up these industries, which are export industries, just like oil in a way, and it just goes to the US, basically all of it. So obviously we were so vulnerable there.
King Charles, deeply moved by the reception in Canada. He was touched by the response he got there. Yeah.
This is a story this was out in the British press last week. But for some reason now, somebody at CBC here has just picked it up and done it himself. But yeah, Buckingham Palace came out and said that he was feeling very affected by all the applause and all the love that he got. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because it was so choreographed and it was quite safe, really, wasn't it? He was in a very very safe sort of crowd. If he'd gone maybe to northern Alberta or something like that, I don't think he would have got that sort of response.
No, and we're doing this story on, Sam Cooper put out this story that Mexican cartels expanding operations in Canada using indigenous reserves as factory hubs. Renee Merrifield, who we're having on here at noon today in her regular Beyond the Ballot thing, she's a big fan of Sam Cooper, and he previously reported for Global News and Vancouver Sun. So
that's very interesting. But I mean, I haven't read this story, but you could see why they would do such a thing, wouldn't you? It's they have a certain amount of sovereignty or independence or whatever. So if you can go in there, then you evade
the FBI has said that that's what's been happening. The Mexican cartel has shifted its focus from the southern border to the northern border. So there you go. And we got a clip here from your favorite Ontarian, Olivia Chow. She's making a speech here in Toronto. Wasn't she just begging for money recently? But listen to her here.
Now, we've all seen the depressing news. Pride Toronto have lost some corporate sponsor because they just don't know who they are. They're short-sighted. They don't know who they are. And the first round of corporate cuts, about $300,000, the City of Toronto said, you know what? We're going to come to the table. We will provide a grant that is $350,000 and every year for 5 years, 62% increasing the funding by 2027. Yeah, that's our commitment to you. Now, then there's the security costs, and then there are now Google and okay, we won't even. I know. I hate telling them. Yeah, don't shop at Home Depot, guys. Rona. Okay. Yeah. There are other choices. Anyway, shop Canadian, shop local. No. Yeah. Yes. We are not the 51st state. Are you kidding? We are proud Torontonians, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, we have another round of funding that you heard about. Yes, another $2 million to help out with the funding need because of security and all that concern.
Has she been in the pub there with Kamala Harris?
I was going to say, what do I ask for in the pharmacy to get that result? I'm interested.
And news for her, Rona is not a Canadian company. Rona was bought by Lowe's.
I've got news for her. You're the mayor of Canada's biggest city. Shut up about these trivial matters and do something about that city's many, many problems, which are, enough to bring people to tears when they think about it. That city is a mess. Fix it.
But if you're plugging Canadian companies in her speech there, she says, shop Rona, support Canadian companies. Rona is owned by Lowe's, which is an American company. Rona used to be Canadian. They were going to change the name to Lowe's, and I don't know, we'll keep that on there because it looks more Canadian. And when they did all this...
not a surprise that she got that wrong, really, is it?
When they did all this stuff and they were talking about shopping local and they pushed all this stuff, not many people follow through with that, and I asked the reporters to go do a job. I said, go look at the parking lots of Rona and Home Depot and then Home Hardware, which is, like a Canadian-owned, locally, independently owned. And, most people shop because the dollar matters to them. They're shopping where they can get the most value. And
well, didn't a company just went out of business, didn't it? I can't remember what it's called now, but that Canadian-owned business, and it was like a hardware store, went out of business. So obviously, people don't care, do they?
Well, and a Canadian business went out of business as well. Hudson Bay. We've done so many stories on Hudson Bay. Canada's oldest company went out of business, and where was the support for Hudson Bay? And it's basically been picked away by vultures. And again, Mayor Chow there was just begging for money from the government because he said they don't have enough money. And now she's just throwing it around and then committing to 5 years of spending money, and then calling out companies and stuff like that. And it looked like, to me, Kamala Harris has made some speeches similar to that. I don't know what they're, like you said, I don't know what. Something's going on. Anyway.
PV Mart, as specious TMX has just pointed out. That's what I was thinking of.
There you go.
So that was only a few months ago. Obviously, quite obviously people were choosing to go to other stores, weren't they, instead of the Canadian one. So, yeah, I think that sort of vindicates your point.
We'll start with this first. Happy birthday to Pierre Poilievre. Here's a picture from his wife, Anita. So there you go. Happy birthday.
What's he listening to there with his AirPods in his ear? What's he got on there?
He's listening
to the radio or something.
Maybe he's listening to us.
Yeah, probably. He should be. He certainly should be.
Before we take on the CBC, calling him Donald Trump. There you go. There's a CBC article there. There you go.
Yeah, this is a very, very amusing story. It's worth reading just to see the kind of things that the CBC will concern itself with. So, like, somebody has recorded a call that they received from a Conservative Party activist, just a randomer that works for the Conservative Party, like probably a voluntary job for all I know. But like, you know, somebody very low down in the party has called them up and asked for money, and then while on the call saying it looks like the Liberals are going to try and like flip some seats that are really tight, you know, through recounts or a judicial process or whatever. And then this person, for some reason, took umbrage to that and sent the recording to CBC. And then the CBC has taken that opportunity to say that, basically to imply lots of like intimations that the Conservative Party is trying to like dispute the outcome of the election and that kind of thing. And then they find a way to mention the Stop the Steal movement in the US and Donald Trump and all that. It's just, you know,
this could be,
it's very dishonorable. That's the word of the day, isn't it? It's dishonorable.
You know, and especially since Buttongate, when the CBC was almost had there, when they tried to do that false flag with Buttongate, and here it is, another kind of Buttongate, and they just fall for it again. And it could have been anybody. And plus, that person is not responsible for the Conservative Party, yet they sure got out the paintbrush real quick and just lathered him up with Trump.
And also, like, he just didn't. There's not really much of a story here. It's kind of, they're talking about these extremely close elections, and there are real questions out there about Elections Canada and questions about ballots. There's another story going around today, I think, in the Canadian press, which is about ballots that weren't counted, but they're in ridings where there's lots of old people who apparently struggle to read the instructions. So they put an X next to someone's name, like actually where their name is written rather than in the little box, and their vote wasn't counted. You know, there are all kinds of conversations to be had. And Elections Canada, you know, not to over-egg it here, but they've absolutely disgraced themselves in at least Terrebonne, that riding where they screwed up and they affected the outcome of the election themselves. Like, they are the reason that there's a Liberal MP in that riding rather than a Bloc MP. It's them. It's all on them. So, I mean, we're not in a situation where Elections Canada is like above criticism and we can't mention these things. And obviously, there's a certain amount of lawfare that can take place. And we've seen that in provinces, haven't we, after tight provincial elections where there are court cases and all that. So, like, again, it's like it's an attempt almost to create like a blasphemy law about discussing the electoral process and how elections are conducted, which is obviously stupid because we should be interested in that. We should talk about that all the time.
Yeah, a fundraiser is not the spokesperson for the Conservative Party. One, so this story is disingenuous at best, deceitful at worst, and it's just another reason why we need to free the media from state funding. And that's where we get back into my soapbox here on the Online News Act still exists here, Bill C-18, and we have media selectively funded by government putting out garbage like this that is just deceiving the Canadian public.
Well, that's like the kind of garbage that you would expect to be published on the Liberal Party's Twitter feed while the main team are off on vacation and there's an intern. That's what you'd expect. Instead, it's CBC's top story today. That's that's how low grade they can be at the CBC.
Yeah, and we got an email here from one of our readers in Penticton, because we have a sister publication down there in Penticton now, and he said there's absolutely no Penticton news there anymore, and that's essentially no local news either, and it's. And he said it's a waste of time. And then your response to him is that we've had to cut back in Penticton because of they've taken away our traffic. They've taken away our access to our audience of over 200,000 people on Facebook and Meta or Instagram that we earned over a decade serving our community. And they selectively fund some outlets. And I liked your response to this person.
Well, the key is. And that applies to anybody listening to us now, send an email to your MP. It does actually have an effect. These campaigns where people they get people to send emails about whatever subject it is, it works. It does get their attention. So that's what I would advise people do. But it's just, even if you're not interested, I've said this before, but like, even if you're not interested in the media, even if you don't care at all, even if you don't like us, it's not necessarily about us. There is an injustice taking place, and it's a really easy one to sort of point out. It's not like you don't need to go and get a PhD to understand this situation. It's an obvious injustice where the government has made a mistake and then they've kind of doubled down and made another mistake, and they've kept making mistakes, and it's unfair. So as in a democracy, it's kind of our job to point out when the government behaves in an unfair way, I think. So send those emails.
We would appreciate it. We would appreciate it. We got some BC news here. We got local news, actually. KGH Doctors here. Interior Health says they're working to address the concerns raised by KGH Doctors. I can tell you this. For that many doctors to speak up, this thing needed to be addressed a long time ago. Now, KGH Interior Health is now looking to address it. As they say, the doctors are sounding alarm. It takes a lot for them to get that motivated, and it's just out of pure frustration, and a lot of them have stood up. And yeah, so now they say, and this is just we can't get an interview, but they send out like a statement. The IH Executive Medical Director for the region, Dr. Sam Azam, said the health authorities experienced a prolonged shortage of primary care providers who support maternity care. There you go.
That's not what the doctors said, though. The doctors said that there are enough staff, but it's just the way that it's organized.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, it would be good. They have so many people in their communications department. Why don't they communicate? Why don't they come and do an interview? Why don't they talk to people? They just issue statements.
Well, like I said, why don't they just, if it really is about a shortage of staff, why don't they just sponsor them to get medical degrees? Like I said, it's not like you don't have to be a genius to be a doctor. Push these people in these useless jobs into a job that matters. Please do that, Interior Health.
Well, I still know, I do know personally several people that are still won't return to Interior Health because of the COVID mandates and the stuff they have to report. They're just refusing to go back there, and there's highly trained people that refusing to go back. Maybe just, say COVID is over and apologize to those people, and maybe they'll come back to work.
Yeah, well, I asked Adrian Dix that, didn't I? And he was defiant back then. They haven't changed their tune. They still feel like they were in the right to do that, and that everyone else was wrong.
Must be great to feel that right all the time and not allow anybody else to have any thoughts on the matter.
Especially when you win elections by a whisker, by a handful of votes in a handful of ridings, and then all of a sudden you're Superman again, aren't you?
So today we have Renee Merrifield will be on the ballot at noon, and then we also have Gavin Dew, the Kelowna MLA, coming to talk about this current situation. He'll talk to us on the crisis here at KGH, but hard to get anybody else. We're going to reach out to some of the NDP. Have you reached out already to Josie Osborne? I imagine we have.
I think Josh might have done it, for his stories, but I'm not 100% sure on that one. I've reached out to her numerous times in the past, and you do tend to get something eventually, but it takes a while. And I've asked for interviews with Josie Osborne and been denied. We've
filed a Freedom of Information request, must be a month now, to asking all this money that was spent in the UK to advertise for doctors and nurses, or doctors actually in the UK, to come to Canada, to British Columbia. How many we got? Still no reply. They said they don't know the numbers. They know the numbers, right? And then, so we had to actually ask under the FOI for it, and we still don't have it. Like, it's got to be a month now that Steve asked for that information.
I'm sure they'll figure out a way to tell us how many inquiries they had.
Yeah, how many
and
robots,
then they'll leave it at that.
How many bots filled out a form. Let's move on to markets. There you go. And here's our market segment. Stock market, relatively flat still. I mean, it's up marginally up 0.5%, but relatively flat. Green, the board's green though, so there you go. Green board.
Down in Canada there, I think, isn't it? TSX.
Up, well, I mean, marginally. I mean, it's fairly flat, right? So, like,
yeah, fairly
flat. Gold off a little bit today after that big jump the other day on geopolitical concerns and tariffs and all that stuff. But gold definitely, hanging in that $3,300 mark, just hanging in there. You're gonna love that, right? But our big story, I guess, is our Bitcoin and gold is about 45.95 Canadian and about 33.48 US. Bitcoin. Bitcoin this morning, about $106,000, $106,000, much more in Canadian dollars, eh? You want to take a guess at it in Canadian dollars?
145.
Let's see if you're right this time. I think it's about 150, but let's see what the magic wheel says. 145. Look at you. Look at you.
That's not bad.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner. There you go. And we're going to have a clip here on the Bitcoin target here in a bit from an analyst. Canadian dollar, again, relatively looking for direction. Again, it can't find direction because it just gets that waffly answer. So it's just like, I'm not sure what to do here. It doesn't go up, doesn't go down. It's just like still waiting for clarity. There you go.
In general, though, it's heading in the right direction if you look back to March.
And a lot of that, a lot of that has to do with the U.S. dollar weakness too, though, right? So we can't credit a lot of that to Canadian strength.
Yeah.
And then we added the oil segment in here, and then oil up a little bit. West Texas Intermediate 63.70, and we did this to Highland. If you look way down in the middle of the list there, you're going to find Western Canadian Select at $50.17.
Cheapest oil in the world.
Cheaper. That's how we sell it. Cheaper. Only if we had an additional market like a Western pipeline or an Eastern pipeline or even the Northern pipeline. If only we had alternatives to sell it to. But
I don't quite understand this AECO natural gas. Do you know what that is? Is that just the Canadian benchmark natural gas price?
Must be, yeah. I don't know it either.
It's cheap as chips, isn't it? Compared to if you look at the US one up there and you look at the Dutch one.
Yeah.
Again, that's another bargain to be had, isn't it?
The Bank of Canada, and that comes out tomorrow morning, and then so the Reuters poll says that they're likely to hold, and I'm of the opinion that they need to cut. The economy's in dire straits, but and maybe they're going to keep some powder dry in case what happens with tariffs. But I think if you're really trying to work, if you're really trying to help the Canadian economy, you need to free up capital because nobody's buying. And nobody's investing, and people are scared to lose their jobs. Like those are the big things right now. People are really worried about losing their job, and nobody wants to make any big purchases right now. And it's just one of those self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Like investment in Canada is all but dried up. So,
but like 2.75, that's pretty low anyway, isn't it? It's kind of starting to skirt the bottom a bit anyway.
Historically low, but when you have a bunch of mortgages that were set when the Bank of Canada rate was 0.25, and they're set to increase. Again, remember when the CBC was protecting Tiff Macklin, when he said famously, it's amazing he still has his job, when he famously said, Canadians can rest assured, and those are the words, rest assured, and go out and get that mortgage because the Bank of Canada will not be raising interest rates into the foreseeable future. And then with the transitory inflation, well, first no inflation, then it was transitory. Then they raised interest rates unprecedentedly by 19-fold. And then now that it's trapped, like one of the greatest bear traps, trapped so many people into mortgages that are going to reset at a much higher price. And then the home value now is going to be, they're going to be underwater in their home value as well, making it really, really tough on them to even fathom continuing to pay for a home that is worth less than what they owe on it. And then they're going to have to pay a lot more for the mortgage. And some people are $200 away from not being able to meet their monthly obligations. So if your mortgage goes up by $1,000 a month, you can't meet that obligation. And it's for a home that's worth, $100,000 or $200,000 less than you own it. I don't know. What are the choices?
TIF's not going to help you, though.
But don't criticize Tiff Macklin for that advice.
Just like you can't say a bad word about Elections Canada. You can't say a bad word about the Bank of Canada either.
Maybe they're going to do a story, CBC is going to do a story on us and how we're just a bunch of whiners that are basically...
anti-Canada, that's what we are.
Anti-Canada,
Russian funded.
How dare we critique the CBC? So,
yeah, that's another thing you shouldn't criticize. It's dangerous to criticize the CBC.
Apparently. We're going to play this clip here from Tom Lee. It's going to surprise you. Let's play this clip here from Tom Lee.
5% of all Bitcoin's been mined, but 95% of the world doesn't own Bitcoin. So I just think that there's still a huge demand versus supply imbalance, meaning there's a lot more potential buyers of Bitcoin over the next 10 years. And so I think there's a lot of upside into year end.
Into your 150 target?
Yeah, 150, maybe 200, even 250 this year.
What? 150 to 200 to even 250. And what's you don't have a terminal price on that, do you?
Well, it's, I think at a minimum it should have the same network value as gold. And if you look at above ground gold, it's probably 23 trillion. So that would be, 1.2 million for Bitcoin. But I think Bitcoin is more valuable than gold. So, gold, Bitcoin could be 2 million, 3 million long term. Even higher.
Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
That guy was shocked, doesn't he, the interviewer? He wants to buy some Bitcoin right now.
Yeah, and that's Joe Kernan. He's a pretty good guy, actually. He pushes back on lots of narratives. Like, he's actually probably one of the better guys out there. He doesn't really just repeat the narratives. But, yeah. There you go. Bitcoin.
Bitcoin world that we live in. Should have bought it when it was a ridiculous meme in whenever it was, 2000, I can't remember, 2005 or something like that, when it was just a hilarious joke.
I'm going to go on to say we're one of the few outlets that covers Bitcoin in Canada, so there you go. And I did a Bitcoin show, and we're probably going to reinvigorate that show. I was doing a Bitcoin show with Scott Deedles here of Kelowna. We did that for a while, and talking about, educating people on Bitcoin, and that was when I think Bitcoin was trading in the 50K mark or something like that. Somewhere in there. And then we're on to our technology section. And in our technology section today, it's all about energy. We've been saying that over and over and over and over again. It's all about energy. And here you go. Here's Meta. Meta just signed a 20-year deal for 1.1 gigawatts from Constellation's Clinton nuclear plant. Biggest agreement yet, starting in 2027. It's all about energy.
That's interesting, isn't it, that the Americans are doing that? Obviously, they don't realize how beneficial it could be to build nuclear power plants so that you can do carbon capture. That's a much more productive way to use the energy from a power plant, isn't it?
They're going to use it for AI, but hey.
Losers. Carbon capture, man. That's where the big money is.
Canada's going to use it as a loop. Yeah. Comedy. Yeah. Iain says that the same thing happened in the 80s. I remember that. I was unemployed. That was the only time I've been unemployed my whole life. I quit the sawmill back in, I think in 1980 or something like that. And thinking that I could get a job in Alberta, went to Alberta and there was no jobs. Came back and there was 50 guys standing at the gate of the mill every day waiting for a job. There was no jobs. So I finally, after a year of drawing unemployment, being an artist for the government, drawing unemployment, went to northern Alberta and got a job as a silver and ceramics technician right away in high-level Alberta. And that'd be a dishwasher. That's where it started. There you go. Yeah, it's tough slugging right now. Tough slugging. And then Elon Musk posted this, and the CIA actually posted this. The CIA has expanded its official presence on X. Make sure to follow official CIA accounts for the latest agency news and updates. There you go. So there you go. You can follow the CIA, or the CIA can follow you. Maybe they're already following us.
It's very odd that because obviously the same thing has happened in other parts of the world, like James Bond's organization as well in England. They're all now like PR men, and it's just so weird. It's like you're supposed to be spies. You're supposed to be in the shadows. Like, bugger off. Go back into the shadows.
I remember I was at a hockey camp in Switzerland, and this lady was there, and her son was there, and they were the only Americans in this camp. And she said that her son keeps getting picked on. He was a smaller kid too, playing hockey, and when you're smaller in hockey, I mean, people bully you. And she said that she worked for the CIA and all this stuff, and then she keeps getting picked on. I said, well, maybe just stop mentioning that if you're. Stop advertising. Anyway. And this should scare you. This is let's go play this clip and then we'll talk about it. But it should scare you. That's good. Okay, that may sound like High Level Alberta or Thompson, Manitoba when the mosquitoes first come out, but that was actually Chinese drones lifting off, and just thousands of drones taking off at the same time. Just think of the damage.
Every time I see a new video like this, I just think like we're doomed, aren't we? We're doomed. And I don't mean us versus China. I just mean the species. Like, we're just doomed. If they're going to be employed by like an actual functioning, sophisticated nation, unlike Ukraine or Russia, like a real powerful country like the US or China, can you imagine what that would look like in warfare? Like,
well, think of
buggered.
Think of hitting a wasp nest with a stick and then standing there waiting for it. You know what I mean? That's what that, like, they've talked about how the Ukraine-Russian war is basically a drone war.
Yeah, well, we saw that a couple of days ago, didn't we? When the Ukrainians sent a flotilla of cheap drones and destroyed the Russians, a lot of the Russians' long-range bomber capacity, which are extremely expensive, sophisticated aircraft.
Yeah, and you can
but
see
definitely, I know it's terrible to die no matter what, really, isn't it? But like, what a horrible way to die to be blown up by a drone as well in one of those trenches. Like, that's such a like soulless way to go, you know. And we're like yesterday you're talking about Keir Starmer in England saying he's gonna make the British Army war ready. It's like, who wants to, like, nobody wants to join the British Army in the first place, but who wants to join the British Army to go and be killed by, a drone? What a horrible prospect that is.
Yeah, it's if you look at some of the coverage, I think the American military puts out some of their video on like what protects like the aircraft carriers and the battleships out there. They got these guns that fire, I don't even know how many bullets per second, but they basically, it's like a swarm's coming at you, and these things just relentlessly punish it. But I mean, at some point you run out of bullets too if the swarm keeps coming.
Yeah.
So,
pretty tragic, really, isn't it, what we've done?
And then that's the negative side of it. But on the positive side, a new note released too by Morgan Stanley's Adam Jonas predicts that physical work conducted by 1 billion humanoid robots may require over 4,000 terawatts of incremental annual electricity demand, roughly equal to one full U.S. grid. That goes back to what we said. It's all about energy. And guess what Canada has? A lot of energy. And guess what also Canada has? Poor policy, so we can't get the energy out of the ground and into use. We're going to build these loops, I guess, and there you go.
But again, there's the Americans. The Americans are going to have armies of robots manufacturing like cars or whatever it is, like really putting their energy into value added, making loads of money for themselves, as they always do down there, while we're going to be using our abundance of energy to suck carbon out of the air
Build
and
a
bury
loop.
it in the ground.
We're gonna sell energy so that we can pay for the thing that sucks it. You know what I mean? Just like it'll just be like a laundromat.
Yeah, then we'll suck it out again. That's a good idea. I didn't think of that. So it'll be put out into the air. We'll suck it at great cost, and then we'll suck it out again. And it's basically perpetual motion machine that we've invented there.
It's a typical Canadian business where you just make enough money to pay the bills. So it's kind of like a laundromat. You just wash, the money comes in the front door, you wash it, and then you put it out the back door. You get to keep none of it. Right? It sounds like media right now.
But I suppose if you look at it, I mean, the absurdity of that situation, it's obviously not apparent yet to people like Mark Carney.
Did we lose the feed again? No. Okay, we're good.
Can you still hear me?
No. Somebody said we lost the feed.
But yeah, it's not apparent to people like Mark Carney. Obviously, Mark Carney's got like a 520 IQ or whatever, so he's on another planet, isn't he? He's such a genius. But it doesn't seem to have struck him yet that if we go in for this carbon capture bollocks and we create nuclear power plants to power that, in 20, 30, 40 years or whatever, it will be apparent what a joke it is, and everybody will say, stop doing this. And then we can use that power for something productive and useful, like robots. So, well, I mean, maybe that's Danielle Smith's long game. She's saying, all right, yeah, whatever. But then in 30 years, she's expecting that people will see through that scheme for what it is.
I would say to people in 10 years, 15 years, you won't recognize the world. And if we do this loop thing, we're going to be like the like Henry Ford's Model T line started up, and we were still screaming about building horses and buggies. And
but to be honest, I often say this, like Canada in intellectual terms and cultural terms, let's say, especially the elite, I feel like it is about sort of 10 years behind, maybe 15 years behind. So you would think that would follow on, wouldn't it? Like, because the Americans, lots of the Europeans, they're changing their attitudes towards things like, in the culture wars, things like immigration and gender and feminism and all that sort of thing. They're changing they're refining their attitudes to it. Whereas here in Canada, it's like the last 10 years just didn't happen. It's still sort of like 2009 here, isn't it? And I think that probably is reflected in the economy as well. I hate to say it because it's a tragedy, but it just seems like Canada likes to hold on to the old ideas a little bit longer than other countries do.
Well, I think for the most part, and this is I'm going to talk to Gavin Dew about it today, is that it seems like a lot of the Canadian politicians, especially the Liberal and NDP, are politically motivated mostly. Like everything to them is about politics. And, like we talked about it, they're advertising in the U.S. to get doctors and nurses, thinking that the people in the U.S. are wanting to flee Donald Trump and that they couldn't figure out how to flee until the BC put up an ad saying, oh, you can come to Canada and for half the money and twice the taxation. Just like, okay. Anyway, we're going to move on because we're running a bit here. We got a few things left to get through. Here's a new, and I'm going to try this out. I found it this morning. It's called Pine AI Call Agent, and actually makes phone calls and stuff like that, dials numbers and cancels things for you, and we're going to try it out and see what happens, and we'll report back to you tomorrow. A couple of just a small notes. Tesla Model 3 and Model Y launched in China's rural EV area. That's huge. They're kind of getting EVs into the rural communities. And Google DeepMind develops personalized AI email assistant. God, that would be great because my email, if somebody could answer all my emails, that'd be awesome. And then we're on to our Are You Serious? And some of the stuff that's just quite surprising. We're going to do our Are You Serious section. There you go. Are you serious with that intro? Are we better off to leave, denounce Canadian citizenship, and come back as an immigrant? That's kind of like. I think we're back. Can you? And maybe we're not back. Maybe we'll save these for tomorrow and just call it here right now. We'll save the Are you kidding me? Are you serious stuff for tomorrow. And we'll just leave it go for that for now. We're already a little bit late anyway, so we're just going to call it for today, and we'll come back tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have this technical difficulty worked out, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching NowMedia.